I'm sitting here in New Haven with Kat Fletcher, who is one of the founding members of Freegle in the UK from 2009, was that
2009?
2009. The first conversation that came up was about where she's living, which is, now there are two interesting focal points where you're living, and could you tell me that story of how upside down the recycling is in your neighbourhood?
Yeah, okay. So this came about because at the bottom of my garden there's a dead-end street, and at the end of that street is the Lewis District recycling depot. So all the recycling trucks roar along the street. So I hope they don't come along in the next half hour.
We might hear them.
Yeah, we might hear them. And the other thing is if I look out there, I'm looking straight at the Veolia energy from waste facility. I would call it an incinerator. Just call a spade a spade. There's a lot of green labelling that goes on onto a lot of facilities. So that was not here when I moved here 12 years ago. So I think it got past. I think it opened in 2012. Yeah, it took they built it from 2010 and finished it in 2012. And it receives all the black bin bag waste from the city of Brighton and Hove, and also from East Sussex, but not from Lewis District, because we divide up our geographical areas in lots of different political ways, and then normally waste management contracts are attached to different local authorities, though sometimes they're attached to a whole county, and because we have a city inside a county, we have complex recycling arrangements regionally, locally here. But at any rate, the incinerator must receive 210,000 tonnes of residual waste every year to operate efficiently, and it never gets switched off. It's on 24/7. And there's one of our recycling trucks.
Let's wait for it to go by. This incinerator is designed to produce energy in what form?
So it creates electricity, which goes back to the national grid. It is possible to build facilities like that and incorporate what's called a district heat kind of accessory attached to the incinerator, and what that would do would redistribute the energy just locally. And indeed that's done in lots of areas around the world. But in the case of this and an awful lot of other incinerators around the UK, although the local community has the blight because it is massive, it's probably the size of 6 football fields or something. It's about 150 feet high, and it is massive. But also the associated traffic. So there's over 250 heavy goods vehicles every single day come through the centre of New Haven to get to it. And so there's air pollution and noise and all sorts of things that the local community has the burden of. But they don't actually give us the power back. It would be nice if you're going to have a facility like that, if they shared the energy locally so that there was some reciprocal benefit. But at any rate, it does create a very small amount of energy that goes to the national grid. There's around 200 incinerators around the UK, and altogether, collectively, they're responsible for between 1% and 2% of all energy created. So in theory, there's a need for incinerators for certain waste. There are other facilities that are specifically for medical waste. So it is really the only safe and healthy way to deal with body parts, for example, and all sorts of detritus from medical situations, including, quite relevant right now, PPE. So that all goes into hazardous waste bags and it goes to medical incineration, which seems like the sensible thing to do. The problem with really big incinerators like the one here in New Haven is it was commissioned by East Sussex County Council and Brighton and Hove City Council under a 30-year contract, which was actually, they started to develop that in the year 2000. So that it's 20 years ago. It took 12 years for it to get built, and actually the landscape politically and environmentally and in every way changes quite a lot over 10 years, 12 years, 30 years. So in fact the contract that was put into place way back when is kind of already quite irrelevant and out of date, but it's an incredibly difficult contract to change. It costs more money to change it than to stick with it, even though it's sort of not up to standard. So one of the problems is that in general the weight of goods way less now than they did 10 years ago or 15 years ago. So whether you think of a plastic bottle or a TV, they're all about 50% of the weight that they were 15 or 20 years ago. But all waste management facilities operate on the weight of waste. And so by the time that got built, residual waste, like waste that's in a black bin bag, actually weighs a lot less, the same volume weighs a lot less than it did 20 years ago when they did the contract for it. So there's all sorts of crazy things that go on with big waste management facilities.
Now, one of the crazy things you did mention to me is about wood chip.
Ah, okay.
So please tell me that story.
Yeah, because you just mentioned that in Sweden they're quite smart with their incinerators, and they do have a lot of local district heat systems. So
A lot.
they burn a lot of. They're very good at recycling as well, though. So it would kind of be okay to have incinerators if you'd really invested in reuse and recycling as well, because then incineration would sit neatly along a really well-funded, vibrant, the alternative steps before residual waste. So in a lot of Norwegian countries, they are very good at reuse and recycling. But sort of back in 2002, the Brighton and Hove City signed a contract with a company and to manage 2 household waste recycling sites, tips, to handle the recycling that the council themselves collect from householders and to operate and manage the incinerator. And although that seems like it's joined up thinking to have the one company doing all those things, actually there might be a conflict of interest there. So they ran out of stuff to burn. You know, they have to get stuff from other councils and from the business sector, which is not what it was built for. It was built for household waste. But they actually have to get waste from other streams because they can't get enough from householders. But it's kind of a disincentive to recycling. And so, for example, at the waste transfer station where all the recycling is sorted, at a MRF, a material recovery facility in Hollingdean in Brighton, there will be big bales of plastic bottles and big bales of cardboard and big bales of paper and the materials that are collected from householders and baled up. But if it has the smallest amount of contamination, less than 5% contamination, it won't go to recycling. It will be diverted to the incinerator. So the contamination rate in most other sites for most materials is 8 to 10% of contamination is acceptable. It can be sorted out at the recycling, but not here. You know, it's a very low contamination rate. So, yeah. There are conflicts of interest, and I think the point being is that if you're going to build a big burning machine, you have to invest the same amount of money into reuse and recycling. And when you have a 30-year contract that you're committed to, it takes all the money out of the pot. So £15 million a year goes to the company to manage 2 tips, to handle the recycling and run the incinerator. There's no money left in the waste pot, you know, to build a reuse depot.
Sounds like money for the boys, as
yeah,
usual.
it's just we trap ourselves into things that aren't very good for us. Last year that the incinerator was operating, so 2012 to 2013, the recycling rate in Brighton and Hove City dropped by 7%. And it has taken until just now, 2019, to get back up to the pathetic recycling rate before the incinerator was built. So it's only 30.4% gets recycled in Brighton and Hove. To put that into context, the national average is 45%. If you live in East Riding in Yorkshire, your recycling rate is 66%. If you live in Wales, your average recycling rate is 55%. So to be 30.4%, we're at the bottom of the league table, right? And yeah, and that's after 7 years to recover back that 7% drop. So that's another problem with incinerators, is they disincentivize recycling and reuse, and a lot of reusable and recyclable goods and materials end up getting unnecessarily burnt.
What was this story you said about the wood chip?
So Sweden actually has an overcapacity of incinerators. Like, they don't create enough waste themselves to supply all their facilities. So they import a lot of waste and to burn in their facilities that then heats their cold country. And they have a lot of incinerators for biomass, for wood, for organic material. And so, so I think the story I told you was like, if I was here now and I had a whole bunch of pallets, for example, that were all rotten and broken and couldn't be reused in any way, and so I'd like to recycle them, I would ring up one of the local fantastic wood recycling projects. There's one in Mid-Sussex and one in Brighton locally, and they provide a service where they'll come and pick up waste wood, and anything that's reusable in any way at all, they will keep at their depot and sell on and give to good causes and so on. But in the case of, say, these rotten pallets, that would be isolated with other unreusable timber that they receive, and that goes to a big plant in Crawley near Gatwick Airport, and it gets chipped. And then we have it's called the Drax Biomass facility in the UK, which processes waste wood and makes energy from it. But when that was built, it was built with an American company, and into the management contract of that facility is that all the wood processed there comes from America. So you have waste wood in America being chipped and being shipped here to the UK to a port, and then going in heavy goods vehicle to the Drax Biomass facility. And if I'm sitting here in Sussex, my waste wood goes to Crawley, and then in heavy goods vehicle it goes down to Shoreham Port, and then it gets piled up there, and then every month or so a big tanker comes along and it fills itself up with our wood chip waste, and it goes to Sweden and gets burnt. And so that's just one example of the insanity of waste management.
Yes.
And you could pick any material, you know, plastic, cardboard, and it's been in the news the last few years that Asia won't take our recycling anymore because it's a burden and we're not good at sorting it, and we're causing untold contamination, environmental hazards in far off countries. And
so what you've pinpointed is a mad situation that is created out of the way people do contracts and the way they do business in a very short-sighted manner and very uncooperative manner, in that they're not opening up the contract to we will become flexible in way to cooperate with governments and with other. They're just doing their own thing. It sounds like.
Yeah, and there's a lot of not joined up thinking.
Yeah.
Which is changing, and I know a lot of quite senior people in the formal sort of waste management industry in the UK, and there's some really amazing dynamic women and men who are trying to drive change through waste management infrastructure in the UK so that we're more resourceful, that we do enable reuse before recycling, and then when we do recycling it's really high quality and worth doing. But the thing is we do have a lot of just existing infrastructure that doesn't work very well with the idea of a circular economy or the idea of being resourceful. So, it's fine to have an incinerator like that, but if only they'd invested the same amount of money into the recycling services that are available locally, or if only they'd invested in a reuse depot for the community at large. And all the sort of better things that one should do are only dealt with sort of in a tokenistic way. I am
possible?
really, really hopeful. And I think actually there's some great examples of grassroots movements, organisations, services and campaigns that have been going for 5 years or 10 years or 20 or even 40 years, of people with a better idea of how to be resourceful, and they're now emerging as kind of the sensible way of doing things. And so big industry and big business in that world are looking to things like Freegle, and the repair cafe movement and the circular economy momentum that is sort of driven by Dame Ellen MacArthur. and she decided to spend the rest of her life working on the circular economy and trying to get all the big corporates in the world to change their business models, because she was a solo yachtswoman. And when she was in the middle of the ocean with absolutely nothing but her yacht and herself and the technology, at the mercy of nature and weather and unknown things, she had a bit of an epiphany really, and realised that we could design everything in a really perfect way that meant we could function and survive and thrive without being wasteful, which is exactly what you have to do on a yacht if it's going to be in the middle of the ocean with one person on it. And she thought, wouldn't it be brilliant if we applied those kind of principles that we've applied on this boat that, is going to keep me alive and get me to the other side of the world? Wouldn't it be great if we applied those principles to the business world and to how we consume and to how we make things? And so, for a good 10 years, she has, not just personally, but in a huge financial way as well, really driven the circular economy movement forward. And so you have huge companies like Coca-Cola, Ford, Unilever, who are all signed up to be CE 100, so the circular economy 100 corporates. And it's not all greenwashing. There's a lot of stuff going on in business around being more resourceful and less wasteful. And so I do live in hope, because it's all very well, all of us being fabulous and busy at a grassroots level and building up movements and campaigns and free services like Freegle, enabling over 3 million people to pass on their unwanted stuff so it gets to a new home instead of ending up an incinerator. But we need everybody, all the points in the supply chain to switch over to a new way of thinking. And so we do need big business to sign up to behave better, to redesign stuff, to design waste out of their supply stream.
Is it true that the combined kind of waste of industry is greater than from humans, or what is the balance?
Absolutely. So the breakdown of waste in the UK, so we haven't, this will bring me on to the Waste House, which is a project I did about 6 years ago at the University of Brighton. But in the UK, the breakdown is around 61% of all waste is generated from the construction and demolition industry, 61. 21% is from industry and commerce, so businesses, industrial estates, factories, and around 18% is from householders. And then there's about 1 or 2% of toxic waste, which is your medical waste or chemicals and hazardous goods and materials. So it brings up a really interesting point that there is an obsession in mainstream media, which has really peaked in the last kind of 2 years, thank you David Attenborough and a whole bunch of people, around householders and their behaviour and their waste and their recycling. And there's huge comms campaigns, and DEFRA does all this research, and WRAP, the Waste Resource Action Program, which is kind of like a charity now, but is sort of like a Quango, used to be a branch of DEFRA, doing endless kind of work on trying to get individuals to change their behaviour and recycle better.
Which will only affect 18% of the challenge.
Exactly. And so that's why you need businesses on board. That's why you need industry, you need huge corporates to change the way, because also asking 65 million people to do a whole bunch of pedantic things all really differently is going to be slow, right?
Well, you can do it in Sweden, because the Swedish people do what they're told, and you can turn the boat all in one go. And in Sweden, you need at least
leadership.
7. You need it leadership, exactly.
And a vision.
Leadership, vision, and then if you're told you need to separate 7 different things in your home, and then take it to the tip and put it, the people will do it. But here, I think you've got more of a challenge there to get that in place.
I'll give you just a completely pragmatic, fundamental reason why that it's incredibly difficult to pull off in the UK. So just in England alone, there's 355 different councils, So there's effectively around 320 completely different recycling systems for citizens, depending on where you live. So what I do with my recycling here, I'm in Lewis District, is completely different from what you do 3 miles that way when you're in the city of Brighton and Hove. And so you can never run national campaigns around behaviour change, around what to do. They all have to be a bit wishy-washy and generic, because there isn't one message that's going to apply to all the different systems. So we created that mess, right? Because we don't have leadership, and a lot of people who should take responsibility for things and forge positive pathways with a long-term vision in government and in business are always responding in a very short-term way because there's an election in a couple of years.
Well, yes. Are there any votes in being the MP who championed recycling?
Well, I mean, I can't even believe I'm going to say this because I'm not a fan of his, but when Michael Gove was the Environment Minister, he achieved more in a government role at the head of DEFRA, which is the Department of Environment, Farming and Rural Affairs, which covers recycling and waste. I mean, he achieved more in sort of a year and a half than the 15 years before. And, you know, like I said, you know, it's not somebody I'd vote for or from a party that I'd vote for, but, you know, credit where it's due. And he drove through a lot of change and ran a lot of public consultations at the lobbying of people like myself and industry and other campaigners. And for example, the consultation that they ran for citizens on, you know, what do you think about plastic bottles and plastic waste, had more responses than any other consultation ever run by the government ever. So I think it was 228,000 people, like citizens, just people at home, like, you know, contributed to that. And they kind of listened, right? And they kind of went, oh, whoa, this is a really big thing. And so, and it's slowed down now because of, let's not mention the B word, but the B word, and because they change ministers all the time, and which is very annoying. So it has slowed down a bit, the actual change, but there are good things on the horizon, like hopefully a deposit return scheme, sort of across communities, which rewards people for putting a bottle or a can into a vending machine. It'll give you a token or electronic rewards to do something, or a free bus ticket.
Yeah, they have this in Sweden.
They have it in Sweden, and they're everywhere, and they really work. And so that is being launched in Scotland because they're way ahead of England in terms of waste management and sort of infrastructure and vision and committing to the delivery of it. So that's what we lack in England. Is we've had lots of fantastic strategies and policy, but boy, is a lot of yada yada yada. Whereas in Scotland, they created Zero Waste Scotland probably, gosh, it must be 8 years ago now or something. And, you know, it's properly funded. It's really diverse in its kind of reach. So, you know, it does stuff with the construction industry, with business, with householders, with charities, has really strong messaging. They do loads of research and development, but they have lots of facilities. They have really useful things like a national reuse hotline. So, you know, if you don't know about how to do the right thing with a sofa or a chair or, you know, or whatever it is, you can actually ring a number and they will, you know. And so that's very real because not everybody's on Twitter or Facebook and not everybody is a recycling guru. But so they have really practical things in there, and they do a lot of work around the circular economy.
I came across you because I did an interview with Darren Beale, who was the man who started Freecycle in, I think, 2003. And clearly it was just the right time because it went global in sort of a year or two. It was really extraordinary. It touched people in a soft spot. It
was just so imminently sensible.
It was sensible.
And I mean, he
practical.
He probably explained when you talked to him, but it came about because I think of where he worked, and they were actually moving office, and he just personally was kind of a bit like, well, we can't leave all that behind, can we? And people were like, you know. And so if memory serves me right, he sort of thought, well, that's really silly. I'm going to like send out an email to all my mates and see who wants 20 desks or, you know, this old print. And then it kind of snowballed from there. And
And he was very lucky because he was in the situation where he was supplying furniture for homeless people who they'd found a home for, but they had nothing.
Yeah.
And
that
then
still
he
goes
had
on
a
to this
warehouse.
day.
So he had a warehouse.
Yeah.
And then a project closed or something, and he had this stuff over. So as you say, he made the telephone call. Oh, they put out the emails, and it was so successful, and he could see that it went. But he was also very lucky, and that the group he was working for was closing down. They handed over the money to him to be able to set up the website and to. So it was a very lucky. Circumstances.
Yeah, it's one of those lovely serendipitous things,
serendipitous
isn't it,
things.
really? You know,
And without
it's a nice
that,
story.
So then it really became a world movement very, very quickly.
It did, and that's because it also coincided with when sort of technology in a meaningful way entered people's homes. So that also coincided with when people got their first PC. Yeah. You know, we didn't have smartphones there, and so it couldn't have happened 5 years earlier, right? Because not everybody had a PC, you know, and word processing machines were quite, you know, fabulous back then. And, you know, if you knew someone that had a PC, it was kind of, you know, you'd go around there and check it out. So, yeah, it was a nice kind of collision of sort of a really simple but smart and obvious idea. And it just merged with when technology became really accessible. And indeed, I ran the Freecycle group in Brighton for a number of years with a couple of other people. And
how did you get involved? I mean, what was your story? But you told me that you were a nurse at one time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you know, last century. I was a psychiatric nurse in Australia, and actually that gives you lots of skills that are really useful in life anyway, and a good understanding of, you know, the range of possibility with humanity and personality is quite an extraordinary. We are extraordinary beasts, you know, and we manifest ourselves in lots of different ways. And no, how I got involved or how I ended up running a Freecycle group was I had a big house in the centre of Brighton, bunch of kids, all that stuff. And when I sold the house, I sort of was trying to, we had detritus, you know, because the kids were kind of, I don't know, 10, 8 and 8 or something. And so, yeah, it was lots of detritus before we moved house. So I was using Freecycle to give away things so that I could declutter and not have to go to the tip with usable stuff. And then I was so grateful for the fact that I was able to pass on loads and loads of my stuff to other people that I thought it would be nice to help run the group just as a little payback, or, you know, could I volunteer sometimes to help what needs doing. And it turned out that behind the scenes of a Freecycle group, or a Freegle group indeed, there is a bunch of really lovely volunteers who are, you know, it's not really obvious to the end user, but, you know, they're keeping spam off the site. They're kind of observing anything untoward and making sure that people aren't taking the piss or trying to give away, you know, firearms or drugs or doing anything illicit. And, you know, and sometimes you need to resolve matters between members when there's a falling out or a misunderstanding. So there's sort of lots of little voluntary things that need to be done to administrate the group, and also really importantly to promote the group and to get more people to use it, because it's just a free service and you just want everybody to know about it. So in between being a psychiatric nurse and sort of now, I did lots of things, but one of the things I did was work in the music industry for years. So I had a lot of PR experience and marketing, and so yeah, I just started kind of promoting the idea of everyone joining the Freecycle group. So in the space of about 18 months, it built up from about 500 members to like 17,000 or something, just in Brighton and Hove, which was really cool. And it was really, really vibrant, really, really busy group. And why I stopped calling it a Freecycle group and why I left the Freecycle network is that really sadly, as a Freecycle volunteer and someone that was running and promoting a group in England, the main organisation itself is incredibly American.
What does that mean?
It's actually run a bit like a dictatorship. There's a couple of people right at the top that just make decisions and do things, and then there's 8,000 odd volunteers around the world who have to adhere to a whole bunch of really rigid rules and regulations, and there's
Could you name a
infringements.
regulation or rule that particularly made life
so
difficult?
just a really simple, ridiculous one. In the city of Brighton and Hove, there was the Brighton Free Cycle Group and there was a Hove Free Cycle Group. And if you posted a message on the Hove Free Cycle Group, you had to live west of whatever the street is that divides Brighton and Hove. Well, you had to live in Hove. You couldn't be one block into Brighton, and you weren't allowed to post in the opposite groups, and it's ridiculous. So the rules are made for if you live in Arizona, right, where it's 300 miles to the next town. But when you apply those rules to a city that's all bunched up against itself, who cares if you post in the Hove group or the Brighton group? But you're meant to ban members if they posted in the wrong group and not allow their messages through, and
so you
check on their address.
You expected to punish people.
Yeah, and to police people.
And when you communicated these things, how was your communication met?
So for about 2 years, there's a whole the British kind of free cycle volunteers formed a bit of a group here, so that we were all talking to each other, and we just kept explaining to them in America how, like, that rule just doesn't work here, and also in rural areas, you know, like it just didn't work. We didn't want borders that were really rigid, and we didn't want to have to police them, because it actually just encourages people to lie and be deceptive to get around the rule.
How did they react?
We weren't allowed to amend the rules in the UK to suit our geography or to suit our kind of society. They just made up rules in America, and they got applied to every group anywhere in the world. And
did you get any response?
Well, yes, we had loads of response, and that we had online forums where everything was discussed endlessly, and
with
Darren and all his team over there, and they were just completely rigid. And the thing is that as a volunteer, we would be reprimanded, and they had the power and ability to remove us as moderators on the group. And that's what they started doing. They started sacking volunteers 10,000 miles away in a different country that they'd never met after 2 years of negotiating. And so I just got sick of it after 2 years. It was really boring. I'm not really a keyboard warrior. Like, I just, you know, it was exhausting, and they were just, unrelenting.
So how did Freegle come into being?
So I decided that I was not going to call the Brighton group a free cycle group anymore, and I was just going to go independent, because I thought, you know, I built it up so much anyway, and I kind of do all this other stuff, and it's cool. I can just keep it going, and it doesn't need to be called that. And so I had to find a name that was available on Yahoo at the time, and so I came up with Green Cycle Sussex, because it was available and I could do it. And at 3 o'clock one morning, I changed the name of the group, got rid of Free Cycle, and transferred the whole group to Green Cycle Sussex. And I sent out an email to the 17,002.
What year was this?
This is 2009. Yeah. And and I just send everybody out an email saying, look, next time you get, you know, a group email, it's not called Free Cycle anymore. I've just had a bit of a falling. I don't want to be part of that network anymore. And we're all really lovely and just local in Brighton. And so everything's just going to carry on as normal, except it'll be a bit easier, because I'm not going to like nag you about your address or your postcode. And unbeknownst to me, there was a Guardian journalist was a member of my group. And so when he got up in the morning, he read this email. But anyway, I think he just replied to the email and went, Kat, what could have possibly happened that makes you want to leave? You know, like, there must be another story here or something. Because I'd been quite cool, and, you know, I hadn't dished any dirt or anything on Free Cycle. I just said, I just think we could be independent. Anyway, he interviewed me, and he published a story that afternoon on the Guardian Online, which kind of, went a bit viral. And so in 2 days, I think 80 free cycle groups in the UK left the Free Cycle network and just went, well, Kat can do it in Brighton, we can do it too. And it is a pain in the arse dealing with them and just arguing with them constantly. And a lot of them had run their groups for 5 or 6 or 10 years, so they just said, we'll just change the name of it and carry on. And then, of course, we realised sort of in about 2 days that so many groups had now done that we could just form our own network.
I read it was about 40% of Freecycle.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So we had 600,000 members, like in 2 days, that were no longer with Freecycle, just because it was the really big Freecycle groups in the UK that abandoned ship early. So Brighton, Edinburgh, Oxford, Shrewsbury, they were all really, really big dynamic groups. You know, Oxford has 50,000 members and Edinburgh has about 40,000 members. So so it was the really big groups that just went, we don't need Freecycle. And we never intended to set up Freegle or invent it or have a network, but it was just it just evolved in the space of a couple of days where we all went, well, we'll just have our own network. And I think all of us that had left Freecycle, we were all on this new forum, and we went, we really need a name, don't we? So that was done very cooperatively, very democratically. You know, everybody suggested names, and we had about 100 names in the hat, and then we voted on them, and then we got down to, you know, the top 6 favourite names, and then we had a final vote, and Freegle won. You know, I mean, there were all sorts of other names there, you know, some of them really dull and some of them quite funny, but it just came about.
And then you said that in the you said that now on the whole was running very smoothly internally, but you had some challenges at the beginin in the organisation and administration.
Sure, because we kind of never set out to do that, so we just kind of went, oh goodness, we kind of we initiated really democratic kind of infrastructure for the organisation, in complete contrast to what we felt Freecycle was like, where we felt it was a dictatorship and the minions, the volunteers, weren't valued and were treated really badly and didn't really genuinely have a say in how the organisation was run. So we just wanted to do the reverse. So we did vote in sort of a board of, I think, 7 people in the beginning, but our board's now 9 people. And that was all just done democratically online, people nominating themselves and saying what they could do and not do. And then, we set about sort of creating, you know, guidelines and a mission statement and our values and what was it we were trying to do. And the website got built by one of our volunteers in 2 days. So I left Freecycle at 3 a.m. on a Thursday morning. At 9 p.m. on Friday night, Freegle existed. We'd voted on the name, 600,000 members and about 60 groups had left Freecycle. And on Monday morning, we had a website and it was fully built and fully functional. So, it just happened really fast. And then quite uniquely, we've had quite a bit of academic research done into our organisational structure, because we sort of unintentionally became a virtual organisation. So we don't actually have a building, we don't have an office, we have no facility anywhere in the UK. Our entire organisation just exists online, as does all our internal infrastructure. So, you know, our monthly board meetings are done on Skype or Zoom, and they have been for 12 years. You know, we're not just doing it because of COVID lockdown, we've always done that. And we have online voting systems for all our volunteers, and we have little subcommittees and groups. So we've got, you know, a development group, we've got a media group, we've got a tech group. And so different volunteers that have different specialisms or interests that want to be involved in developing the site and, you know, help keeping everything going, they can join those little subgroups, and they're all online. And then once a year the board actually meets up now, because we realised after about 5 or 6 years that most of us had never met each other, which was a bit bonkers. So we meet up now every January. We normally just go to Birmingham or London, and kind of everyone comes from wherever they are, the 9 of us, and we meet up, which is really nice, you know, because we do so much online and virtually, so it is really lovely to meet up. And then normally, sadly not this year, but normally we run a sort of a camping weekend as well. Normally, where do we do it? In Hereford, I think, and people come from all over, and you get a flow of people. Some people come for the whole weekend. It's in a camping ground, and have a big communal tent, and everybody brings food and a tent or their camper van, and anything from, well, yeah, like I say, some people stay the whole weekend, some people come for an afternoon, but that's a really nice social gathering. And yeah, we can't do it this year. So for I think for the first 5 or 6 years that Freegle existed, we had a policy where if the Freecycle group had not left Freecycle and it was still there, so for example Rye, they just stayed in Freecycle, we deliberately did not set up a Freegle group there. We just let Freecycle be the big group. But after about 6 years we went, if someone wants to run a Freegle group, why not? So that's why there is now a Freegle and a Freecycle in Rye. Because we just went, well, there's no warfare, it's not a competition. But the thing is that, we'll often get, Freecycle is the brand leader, if you like. It's like vacuum cleaners being called Hoovers or Dysons. Like they're just, it rolls off people's tongue. But actually, I run massive social media campaigns for Freegle, and we often get publicity on TV or in a national newspaper or something, so it makes sense that we cover most of the UK. It's just very annoying if I get us into the Daily Mail and everyone, oh, Freegle, that's great, and then they don't have a Freegle group in their town. That's just really annoying. So we have actively tried to sort of make sure we cover all the UK, and I mean, it's a very simple thing. People just give away things that they don't want anymore, and the idea is that there will be somebody in your local area that can make use of that. Either they'll repair it or upcycle it or simply reuse it for its intended purpose.
Abundant.
Yeah, I mean, one of the lovely things about reuse is, of course, it takes an effort. You have to decide to do it. You have to collect things or drop things off or whatever. But it's a very social activity, and recycling is pretty much a chore. And some people embrace it and just do it. Other people, it's too overwhelming. They can't even sort out their cans and their bottles right, and they just don't do it. It's a chore. There's nothing sort of, for most people anyway, there's nothing too enjoyable about it. Whereas you do have this added bonus with reuse of you get to meet other people that you might not otherwise meet. You often meet people who've got similar interests to you or have some relevant crossover, because if you're giving away baby clothes, it sort of stands to reason you're probably going to give them to someone who's got a baby, right? So now you've just met another new mum. And the same if you give away a tennis racket. You might be over your tennis phase, but you're going to meet someone who's just taking it up, and so you have all these lovely sort of unintentional alliances that come about, and
presumably people make friends for life through those kind of contacts.
Absolutely. I mean, I know hundreds and hundreds of just lovely people just because I've given away a desk, or they've come to pick up plastic plant pots or something like that, and then you find out about other things, and then you discover that actually most communities in the UK just are bubbling over with amazing grassroots organisations and people being lovely and helping each other, but it's not big branding, and they don't have money to big themselves up, but they just get on with it. There are community orchards and there's repair cafes, and a project I did with the University of Brighton, which we finished in 2014, is called the Waste House, and with an architect, Duncan Baker Brown from the University of Brighton, and then with a plethora of local businesses and tradespeople and researchers and students and college kids, and in partnership with the City Council, we built an architect design house on the campus in the centre of Brighton, and 90% of the materials used to build the house are reused. They're second hand or pre-loved, or they're leftover or excess or damaged stock from another building site or from a merchant, and it's won 2 Royal Institute of British Architects awards. In fact, it was shortlisted for the Stephen Lawrence, the Stephen Lawrence Award and for the Sterling Prize. So the building's taken very seriously by establishment architecture and designers and stuff. But actually it was a beautiful collaboration between people like myself, just grassroots organisation, professional people, businesses, local social enterprises, prisoners, all sorts. And our kind of slogan for that project, and still to this day, is that there's no such thing as waste. There's just stuff in the wrong place. So my vision is about having the appropriate facilities, physical facilities, services, knowledge, and investment, so that as a society, a supposedly very rich, modern, sophisticated society, that we would have everything in place to make sure that everything is treated as a resource and ends up in the best possible place, you know, and that probably doesn't involve me chucking out pallets here, at getting chipped at Gatwick, going to Shoreham and being shipped to Sweden, you know, and it's going to take a long while to phase out some of the absurd kind of supply chains that we have with waste. And for me, it's about really focusing on consuming less brand new stuff. When you do consume new stuff, you make sure it's the best design, it's durable, it's repairable, it's ethical. You know, nobody's died in the making of, you know, this gadget, this item of clothing, that the people who are responsible for producing that TV or that t-shirt have been paid properly and have proper living conditions. So we have a long way to go. So in the UK, we consume 600 million tonnes of brand new goods every single year. And the majority of those are imported. And remarkably, if we talk about reducing our carbon footprint, and in fact we have a target in the UK to reduce our carbon footprint through some very creative accounting by our government, they do not actually calculate the carbon used to make those 600 million tonnes of goods that enter our economy every year from outside of the country. We do not count the carbon embodied in those goods and materials.
Which must be huge.
It's huge, of course it's huge, because nearly everything we consume comes from outside our borders, and then we don't count the impact on the planet. So you have to be aware of all these things, and when you start wanting to label, which I agree with you, know who made it, where's it from, what you find is, when you drill down, is there are zillions of internal arguments over how you measure carbon, over, you know, it's recyclable. Yeah, well, it is technically recyclable, but actually no one can recycle it because there's no infrastructure to collect that item. So you can tell me it's recyclable as much as you like, but unless, you know, my local council collects it for recycling, or there's a special bin for it in my local area, it might as well be unrecyclable, because I have no means to recycle it. So there's, you know, there's a lot we have to do. So for me, I probably Freegle more than anybody in the UK, because I clear entire office blocks and big buildings for the NHS, for local authorities, for universities, and I get paid to do that for them. So instead of them paying for waste disposal or skips, they pay me, and I literally audit the contents of what they've left behind in a building, and then I list it all on Freegle and I give it away on a massive scale. Like I said, I did a building for Brighton. I've done 25 buildings for Brighton and Hove City Council, but I did one in 2016, 2017, King's House, which is a 100,000 square foot building, and they left behind 170 tonnes of unwanted stuff, and 150 tonnes of that got given away on Freegle. When I do them, I mean, I'm doing a building for the NHS right now, I explicitly say to people, I don't mind if you pick up this desk and give it a lick of paint and sell it on Gumtree. I'm completely fine with that, because there are 189 desks here and times are tough, and if you've got the wherewithal to be able to fix, you know, you're investing time and energy into fixing something up, I have no problem at all, you know, if you need to make a bit of money. But it's quite understandable that other people using Freegle might not be happy with someone else selling it. And, you know, I'm certainly not happy with people in an organised, manipulative way taking advantage, you know. So, you know, I mean, in the past, years ago, and it doesn't happen so much now because frankly everyone's realised there's too much stuff in the world and there's no need to be deceptive on Freegle. But years ago they would be sort of your man and van who would respond to 35 offers on the Brighton Freegle route.
But you could spot them.
Yeah, and so we did. Yeah, but that hasn't gone on for a long time, and frankly there's no need to do it. There's so much stuff available that you don't need to lie or be deceptive or go about it.
So you're asking people to be transparent with what they're doing, but you're open to a mixture of giveaway and barter and trade in some way.
We don't encourage bartering or trade or swapping, because that instantly creates a dynamic, and so it's no strings attached. So we actually do not encourage. We actively don't want people to barter, to swap, or to put restrictions on it. It's just you give away things, no strings attached. And to be put everything in perspective, I would say 99.5% of transactions that go on Freegle is an individual giving something away for free to another individual who uses that item. And so this is where I should tell you about other networks that exist. For the construction industry, to give away for free or to buy and sell, there is enviromate.co.uk. So any construction site, any building company, any DIYer, any citizen can go on there and can either give away leftover roof tiles or bags of cement, or they can sell, we ordered 40 pallets of bricks, we've got 3 left over, and they can sell them. So that's a fabulous network just for building materials.
Wonderful, wonderful.
We have Pre-Loved, which is really for clothes, primarily around clothes and kind of personal accessories, though other things do go on there. We have Globe Chain, which primarily, it's an online sharing platform for businesses, but most of the activity actually just takes place in London. And so there's a lovely woman called May who runs that, and she does very similar stuff to me, but in London with businesses. So that might be an office clear out, and so they will employ Globe Chain and use that platform to either sell or to give everything away. And May works with universities and corporates, and so there's that. And then there's a system called Warp It, and that's run by a lovely guy, Daniel, who's from up north. And so it's like Freegle, but with bells and whistles on it. And it's intentionally set up for public bodies, so the NHS, local authorities, and for universities and for businesses. And so same thing, you can give things away, or you can also sell them, buy them. So an example of how that works is the entire Scottish NHS are members of the Warp It network. So if you're in a hospital in Aberdeen and you've got 10 trolleys that you don't want anymore, you can list it on Warp It, and maybe a hospital in Dundee needs trolleys, it will see them and it matches up the unwanted stuff. And so they, before they buy new goods and materials, maybe not during the pandemic, but normally, and also bearing in mind that the NHS isn't just about hospital beds, they have huge office blocks with office workers and desks and storage cupboards and IT equipment, and it's not just medical stuff. So the idea is to share assets, to keep them from going to unnecessary waste. It saves them money, it's good for the planet. I mean, reuse and the redistribution of unwanted assets just ticks so many boxes that we're just insane to not do it more. But that's why I just mentioned these other networks, because also if you're a local authority or an NHS or a university, you can use Freegle as well, but often departments need to legally hand over an asset. There might be insurance involved, there might be health and safety or standards, or
so it makes it easier if you're swapping between
so Warp It sort of has built into its system you can have safety disclaimers and insurance and sort of legal things there, so that things can be legally handed over. And it just sort of and it works on a subscription basis. So it's not free for the NHS Scotland to all use it. They pay an annual subscription, but it's more than covered by the money they save by not unnecessarily
and somebody's got
buying
to run
stuff. Yes, that's right. And also, Freegle is free to use, but it's not free to run. So, we rely on the goodwill of donations, most of them very small, which is fine.
Well, you have a budget of £40,000 annually.
Yeah, we do.
And where does that money come from? Where does it go?
So, no government grants, no big funding. We had a few little pots of funding a couple of times over the years, but they've been for very specific projects. Like I did one in London for example, and ran some events. But we've never actually got funding sort of just to run Freegle. We've won some competitions where you can win money for charities. So a global eBay, a national eBay competition for your favourite charity. We've won that a couple of years. It's sort of $7,000, I think we win when we win that. We won a Microsoft global competition for, you know, being one of the most sustainable, useful, lovely grassroots charities, and we actually won $30,000 US. So we used that to build a brand new, beautiful website. That's what we did with that money. In general, day to day, we completely rely on the goodwill of donations from people who've maybe, you know, they're so chuffed that they've been able to clear their mum's house or sort out the garage, and it hasn't cost them any money, and so we just ask them if they can donate £1 or £2 or a fiver or something, and zillions of people do that. And then there's a couple of lovely people, for we don't know why, but for lovely altruistic reasons, you know, there's someone who gives us £5,000 every year. I'm not, you know, I don't know who they are or why, but they just think it's lovely that we exist, and they can obviously afford to do that. So there you go. And I think we've got a couple of little funding bids in at the moment, because there's some money floating around for organisations that are useful for COVID and people in lockdown, and a lot of decluttering has gone on, and fly tipping is on the rise, because not all tips are open and they're very restricted in what they're handling, and so there is a great need to sort of enable people to try and pass things on. We shut our website down on March the 23rd when the government put us into lockdown on that Monday night, because we felt that that was the responsible thing to do. If people were only allowed to leave the house to buy food, medicine, or to help a vulnerable person, we thought that by having the website open, we would encourage people to do unessential things. And also we were right at the start of it, so there were a lot of things that were unclear about hard services, and, you know, could it be passed on through clothing and whatever. And on May the 1st, the government published quite a long document, which was the guidelines for the waste and resources industry on how they could reopen, because all the tips had closed down and all the wood recycling projects had closed down and Freegle's closed down, and so and that got sort of revised and updated a bit, and on the 8th of May there was a subsection in there which was advice for local authorities, which was the government saying, you know, you'll be very concerned that there's going to be long queues, there's going to cause traffic, that you can't receive lots of goods. One thing you can do is refer your citizens to online reuse networks so that they can pass on certain goods from home without having to leave home. So once that went into the guidelines, May the 8th, we thought, well, that's actually, how can
That's the green light, isn't it?
Yeah, how can local authorities refer citizens to use Freegle if we're shut? We created some guidelines on how we thought it is COVID safe to Freegle.
You've got them on your website.
We've got them on our website.
I
pop it out on social media all the time, and a lot of our groups are still shut because they're in places where those local volunteers feel that it's too soon, and that's completely fine. See, this is where we're very open and democratic, and we figure that the local volunteer in the middle of Wales knows more about that than I do, sitting here in Brighton. So that's completely fine. Well, I can just go by, the Brighton group, which has been open since May the 8th, and people seem to be being imminently sensible. They're actually putting in their messages. I've washed the outside of the dishwasher. It's been in my hallway for 3 days, and I'm going to put it outside my house for whoever wants it. And people giving away bags of clothes, saying, look, I washed everything before, and people saying you can only pick this up if you get it from my garden. And so, I think people are being pretty sensible. Maybe there's a couple of people being dipsticks about it, but they will anyway. But we did try to do the right thing, and and also very emphatically said to people that if you're vulnerable or you're in any way unwell, you should not use Freegle, you should not receive anything, and you should not give anything away. And because we're an online organisation and we never meet, never mind our members, we don't even meet our other volunteers, right? So there's a lot of goodwill and trust that's built up, and it's probably one of the lovely things about Freegle, as opposed to just giving away stuff randomly on Facebook, which millions of people do, is that we have actually built up really lovely communities where a lot of the people who are active on a Freegle group kind of feel like they know each other because, you know, they've got things and given them away, and it is true that people have met each other and they do know each other. So I think there's quite a you know, there's a warm fuzzy thing.
Yes, there's a warm fuzzy
it.
thing, but it also seems to me that there is also a power base. That you've got you have a group that potentially has a unified voice and some leverage in political, local political, global political.
So we've got a little thing going at the moment. There's someone we just pay to do a little bit of freelance work for us. She used to be a local authority recycling officer, and she's got a degree in sustainability and stuff, and she does some work for Freegle, which is where some of the donations go, in case people wonder. And she's trying to engage with councils, and, you know, fly tipping is a huge burden to councils in normal times, never mind COVID. And, you know, also the more waste and recycling that councils have to handle, the more it costs them, right? It's actually a big cost involved. So there's a big advantage to councils kind of co-promoting Freegle, because we can actually take some strain off them and create some community resilience. And so we do have quite a lot of councils around the UK that are working much closer with us now. And what's one example? So, for example, Lewis District Council is going to sponsor the Lewis Freegle group, and so they're going to make an annual donation, and that's kind of that's a meaningful financial contribution to keeping the group there.
Is this the first one in the UK?
It's not the first one. The first one might be Essex, I think. But there's anyway, we're working on that, and a lot of councils are really into it and kind of get it, because it's not a lot of money, right? It's a couple of £100. We're not talking big bucks. And so that's nothing, you know, when you've got a budget of millions, that's okay. And
Drop
then,
in the ocean.
and then we give them a report on the waste prevented, the carbon savings of the new consumption that hasn't taken place, the second-hand value of the goods that have transacted, but really important for councils, if we can give them a carbon savings. So Freegle members in this council area facilitated this much reuse with this much economic value going back into the community. It prevented this much waste. And you can add this to your council data now. It saved this much carbon. And so that's really valuable to councils. And we collate all that anonymous data behind all the transactions that take place on the website.
Now that's quite a lot of work to get this these statistics
Coding.
together.
We've got geeks that
so
do
you
coding.
tag everything in certain ways, and so you have an automatic system
We have
for
a
being
way
able to.
of behind all the messages of categorizing whatever it is being given away. Sometimes that's really obvious because people say, I've got a sofa.
Yeah. So then.
Other times they go, various household goods.
Yeah, that's.
Is that electrical? Is it clothing?
Yeah.
So there's things that slip through the net. But what we do is.
But that's an automatic system. That is artificial intelligence kind of in your system.
We've got a couple of really lovely geeks who work all this out and do it through coding and stuff. And then, not that most people realise, but there is actually a government-approved list of standard household items with their average weight. And then there's an algorithm you can use to calculate the second-hand value of any.
Which is available on this government site.
So the weight, the average weight, is the government actually commissions. It's called the Reuse Network, and they run charity shops to develop this document years ago, and then it gets updated every couple of years. So, for example, on this document, it will tell you that the average weight of a 2-drawer filing cabinet is 12 kilos. And a 4-drawer is 20 kilos, or whatever it is. I just made that up.
And this is on a website.
It's on a document, which someone like Freegle can get.
Yeah.
Other businesses can pay for it to buy it. It is like a document that's updated, but it has everything on there that you could imagine being in an office or a home. You know, everything from a laptop cable to a washing machine.
So it makes it easier for you to do these calculations.
Yeah.
And to
So there
produce
is
these
actually,
statistics.
we don't invent
No.
the data, that data. We just use that data to extrapolate what goes on Freegle. And then there's another calculation you can do based on the weight of items on what the second-hand value of that item is. So that's just letting, then you can tell a council, well, through all the Freegle activity that went on in Lewis last year, that's goods to the value of £50,000 have been freely redistributed in your area. So that's kind of really nice to know, because you can then attach...
It also gives you a little, you could say, well, if that £50,000, people could have bought stuff for that money, new stuff, and that has some sort of relationship to the reduction in consumption.
Yes, and also some people don't have the money to buy it new anyway.
Yes.
So it's an intervention in reducing poverty. So a lot of people, their washing machine will break. It can't be fixed.
Correct.
They don't actually have the money to buy a new washing machine. It's a very normal story. You don't have to be poverty stricken to be in that situation. A lot of people only have a month, 2-3 months of money, that they can fall on, and so you're also indicating the amount of sort of social good that's going on.
Yes. Do you feel that people who really are on subsistence level and who are under the national income minimum and so on are know about Freecycle and are taking advantage?
Not everybody, but an awful lot do. Yeah. And we do try to make sure that, like, the Citizens Advice Bureau remembers to mention us, and there are lots of mutual aid groups on Facebook, which are grassroots bunches of people helping each other out in really hyper local kind of areas, whether it's delivering food or walking a dog for someone or whatever. And we've tried to kind of remind people in there, look, you've got your little mutual aid group now, but actually Freegle's always been there, and there's zillions more people on there, and so you'll have much more success of finding a washing machine if you ask for it on Freegle rather than on your little group here, which has got 35 people in a couple of streets. So just trying to remind people that it's there. And I wish more people knew about it. And it is funny sometimes when I'll meet someone and tell them about it, and they've just never heard of it. I mean, there still are people that have just never heard of Freecycle or Freegle.
No, that's and it's funny because it has been around quite a long time.
We have been around for a really long time.
So, what are you presently doing to raise awareness?
So I think that work we're doing with the councils is really important, because we also create a big package for the councils, so it's just really easy for them to include information in their weekly newsletter or on Twitter or on Facebook or whatever. We actually give them all the assets,
and they're doing that
press release, and we give them all the graphics, and so it's just really easy for them to just start promoting Freegle. And I think so in the UK, most citizens, when they want to figure out what to do, and especially when it comes to waste, the number one place they go for signposting is a council website. So it took me 9 years, but for example, on the Brighton and Hove council website, when you go to waste and recycling or bulky furniture on their thing, it mentions Freegle. Yay!
How many councils are doing that, do you think?
I think we've got that on. So there's about 355 councils, and I'd say we've got it on about 50 councils. So it's
it's beginning.
Yeah, but it's hard
You've
work,
got a way to go.
right? Yeah,
hard work. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard work, but
but having 50 must make it that much easier, because
absolutely,
because you've got something behind you there. So but that's something you're working on. Yeah. Actively. Yep. And so that that really makes sense, because as you say, where are people going to go for their information?
Yeah,
and
it's
then
just
as long as it's
signposting.
listed,
As long as it's there as an option. And I think a really interesting thing I read the other week is that during lockdown, the big crunch of it, Google searches, the search for how to live more sustainably increased, or in various versions of that kind of question, 4,600% increase in Google search for how to live more sustainably. So that just tells me that, one, people had time to search these things where they might have been thinking about it before but never quite got round to asking Ecosia or Google, you know, what to do. But there's a big appetite out there,
Yes.
right? I think people became all of a sudden really aware of the dreadful impact that we had when people could start hearing the birds again and realise that the air smelt better and there wasn't so much noise, and it's like, oh God, maybe we could live a bit differently so we had more of that in the future. So I think there's probably a lot of new people that will end up using Freegle. Some of them sadly because of dire financial need, and they may have lost their job or their business or something. I think there's a whole other bunch of people that just want to live leaner and cleaner and greener and just not have such a big impact on how they live.
You go.
Have you heard of the Good Gym?
No, I haven't. Tell me about it.
So
Please,
you need
tell
to
me
know about the
Yeah,
Good Gym.
I do need to know.
So they're all over the UK. There's a massive one in Brighton. So they're just someone thought up the idea, and so now they all joined. But they're just people who go jogging or running anyway as part of their normal life, right? Whether it's once a week or every day or whatever. So if you join Good Gym in where you live, like I said, they're all over the UK. When you go for your run, you do good deeds along the way.
This is my dream come true without having to do anything.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been dreaming.
So, for
that's what I've
example,
been
you know, and it's
promoting,
been really useful, obviously, during COVID and stuff, but they've been
Yeah.
around long before that. So they do a whole variety of things. Sometimes it's just like, the local church needs a hall painted.
Yeah.
So they'll all jog there. And then, you know,
Paint.
they really paint in
Yeah.
a very vigorous
'Cause
way, right? And so they turn everything kind of into... Yeah, and they really over-physicalise it.
So there we
and
are. It's already exists.
It already exists.
Well,
and it's the
it's-
loveliest thing, and they do so many cool things.
Lovely.
And that's a lovely example of, again, technology, just a lovely idea and community coming together.
Plogging, thank you very much. It's a new word to me.
Yeah.
So this is when you're jogging, you pick up the litter. So there's plorking as well when you're just walking, and there's plishing as well when you're fishing. There's picking stuff out of the or plimming when you're swimming and picking things up.
A couple
So there
of
we
years
are.
ago, the EU used to actually pay Mediterranean fishermen to catch plastic.
Plastic, yes.
Yeah.
This is
And they got paid more money for that than they would have if they'd caught fish, but it was also a good way of letting the fish recover, the stocks, keeping them employed, and they were just fishing plastic out of the sea.